The awakening. The silence in the depths of space was broken by a single pulse of light. Deep within an asteroid field, forgotten by the galaxy for 3 millennia, an ancient beacon flickered to life. The pulse traveled through circuits that had waited patiently in the cold darkness, awakening systems that had slumbered since the day Earth died. Commander Sarah Chen's eyes opened to sterile white light. Her lungs burned as they drew their first breath in 3,000 years. Ice crystals fell from her skin as the cryogenic pod systems hummed to life around her. The metallic taste of preservation fluid filled her mouth as she struggled to sit up, her muscles weak from centuries of sleep. "Welcome back, Commander," came a synthetic voice from speakers hidden in the walls. "Phoenix protocol activation successful. You have been in cryogenic suspension for 3,047 years, 6 months, and 12 days. Sarah's mind reeled as memories flooded back. The final evacuation of Earth. The massive ships of the Hegemony Alliance darkening the sky. The desperate plan to preserve humanity's future in secret installations scattered across the galaxy. The Phoenix Protocol. It had all been real. "Status report," she managed to croak, her voice barely a whisper. "Facility Alpha 7 is fully operational. Life support stable. 47 of 50 cryogenic pods have successful revivals in progress. External sensors detect no hostile presence in the immediate area." Other pods throughout the chamber began to open with soft hissing sounds. Sarah watched as her crew emerged one by one. Dr. Marcus Webb, the brilliant xenobiologist who had discovered the hegemony's true nature just days before Earth's destruction. Zara Rodriguez, the military engineer, whose hacking skills had made the Phoenix Protocol possible. Captain Jin Watanabe, whose steady hands had guided their escape ship through impossible odds. Each face showed the same confusion, the same growing horror as they remembered what had brought them here. The galaxy they had known was gone. Everyone they had ever loved was dust scattered among the stars. "The others," Jin said, his voice hoarse. "The other Phoenix sites, are they?" "Scanning now," the AI responded. "Phoenix Protocol sites Beta through Gamma are responding to activation signals. Estimated survivor count across all facilities is 2,300 humans. 2,000. Out of 8 billion souls that had once called Earth home, only 2,000 remained." Sarah felt the weight of that number settle on her shoulders like a mountain. They were all that was left of humanity's dream among the stars. Dr. Webb was already at a data terminal, his fingers flying over the controls despite his weakened state. "I'm accessing the historical archives," he said. "We need to know what happened after we went under." The main display screen came alive with images and data streams. What they saw made their blood run cold. The Hegemony Alliance had renamed itself the Galactic Council and proclaimed itself the Guardian of Peace and Order. Earth's destruction was recorded in the official histories as a necessary intervention to prevent human aggression from destabilizing galactic civilization. "Lies," Zara spat, her dark eyes flashing with anger. "Every word of it is lies." The records showed that the Council had grown in power over the millennia, absorbing more and more worlds into their empire. Species that resisted were labeled as dangerous and dealt with accordingly. The galaxy had become a prison, with the Council as the sole jailer, but there were other records hidden in the data streams, whispers of rebellion, reports of species going extinct under mysterious circumstances, references to cleansing operations and stability maintenance. "Look at this," Webb said, highlighting a section of the archives. "The Vorthak Rebellion, the Zentari Uprising, the Kethvar Resistance. Dozens of species have tried to fight back, over the centuries. They were all crushed." Sarah studied the data with growing determination. "What about their technology, their military strength?" "Superior numbers," Jin reported from another terminal. "But their technology has stagnated. Look at these ship designs. They're barely more advanced than what we were using 3,000 years ago." "That makes sense," Webb said thoughtfully. "Oppressive regimes don't innovate. They don't have to. They just need to maintain control." Sarah felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. "But we do. We had to innovate to survive. Show me what we've been working on while we slept. The AI displayed the results of 3 millennia of automated research and development. The Phoenix Protocol hadn't just preserved human lives, it had preserved human ingenuity. While the galaxy stagnated under the Council's rule, human technology had continued to evolve in the darkness between the stars. New propulsion systems that could cross the galaxy in days instead of months. Weapons that could disable entire fleets without destroying them. Medical technology that could heal wounds that would cripple other species. Most importantly, communication systems that were completely undetectable by Council sensors. We're not just survivors, Sarah realized. We're ghosts in their machine. They think they erased us, but we've been growing stronger in the shadows. A proximity alarm chimed softly. Incoming vessel detected, the AI announced. Configuration unknown. Estimated time to arrival 4 hours. The crew tensed, hands moving instinctively toward weapons that had waited 3,000 years to be fired again. But as the ship drew closer, they realized it wasn't a Council vessel. It was smaller, older, and it was broadcasting a signal on a frequency that made Sarah's heart race. That's a human emergency code, she breathed. But that's impossible. The ship docked with their asteroid facility without triggering any defensive systems. The airlock cycled, and a figure in an environmental suit stepped through. When they removed their helmet, the Phoenix crew gasped. It was an alien, but not like any they had seen before. Tall and graceful, with silver skin and large, intelligent eyes that held depths of sadness and hope. When it spoke, the words came, through a translation device in perfect English. My name is Kalen of the Ashaki, the being said. I have been waiting 3,000 years to meet you. Sarah found her voice first. You know about us? My people remember, Kalen replied. We remember Earth, we remember humans. We remember the truth that the Council has tried to erase. The alien gestured to the walls around them. The Ashaki were one of the first species the hegemony encountered after your world died. We were strong then, proud. We resisted their lies about humanity. They made an example of us. Webb leaned forward. What happened? They destroyed our homeworld, scattered our people across the galaxy as refugees and slaves. But some of us escaped. Some of us preserved the true history. We have been waiting for this day when the Phoenix would rise from the ashes. Sarah felt the weight of destiny settling around her like armor. How many others know the truth? More than you might think, Kalen said with a slight smile. The Council's oppression has created countless enemies, species that have been crushed, worlds that have been strip-mined, cultures that have been erased. They all remember their losses. They are all waiting for someone to light the spark of rebellion. Zara stepped forward, her engineer's mind already working on the possibilities. You're talking about an alliance, a real one, not the Council's puppet show. I am talking about liberation, Kalen replied. The Council has grown complacent in their power. They believe their own propaganda. They think they are invincible because they have crushed every rebellion for 3,000 years. Jin's tactical mind was racing. But they've never faced humans before. Not the real us, not what we've become. Sarah looked around at her small crew, then at the displays showing the thousands of other humans awakening across the galaxy. 2,000 souls against an empire of trillions. The odds were impossible, just like they had been when humanity first reached for the stars. But humans had never been deterred by impossible odds. Kalen, she said formally, on behalf of humanity, I accept your alliance. It's time the galaxy learned what happens when you try to erase a species that refuses to stay dead. The alien's eyes brightened with something that might have been tears. Then let us begin. The Phoenix Protocol was Phase 1. Now we move to Phase 2. Which is? Webb asked. Sarah smiled, and for the first time in 3,000 years, it was a smile that promised justice rather than sorrow. We remind the galaxy why humanity earned its place among the stars, and we make sure no one ever forgets again. The asteroid facility hummed with new energy as humans and aliens worked side by side, planning the impossible. Across the galaxy, Other Phoenix sites were awakening. Other alliances were forming. The long night of the Council's reign was about to end. The Phoenix was rising, and its fire would burn away 3 millennia of lies. The reckoning 6 months after the awakening, the galaxy began to change in ways the Galactic Council could not understand. Ships disappeared from remote systems without sending distress signals. Communication relays went offline for brief periods before mysteriously repairing themselves. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for centuries began experiencing unexplained delays. High Counselor Vextar stood before the massive view screen in the Council's central command chamber, his scaled hands clasped behind his back as he studied reports that made no sense. Around him, lesser officials scurried about with the nervous energy of beings who knew their leader was displeased. "Explain to me," Vextar said in his carefully modulated voice, "how an entire patrol fleet can simply vanish without trace." Sub-Commander Kralek, a nervous member of the hegemony's military arm, consulted his datapad with trembling hands. "High Counselor, our investigation suggests equipment malfunction. The ships were old, due for replacement. It's possible they suffered simultaneous life support failures." 20 ships, Vextar said softly, his voice carrying the promise of terrible consequences. 20 ships, all experiencing the same malfunction at the same moment. "Do you take me for a fool, Sub-Commander?" Kralek's skin changed color from blue to a sickly green. "No, High Counselor, but our sensors detected no hostile vessels in the area, no energy signatures consistent with weapons fire. They simply stopped transmitting." What neither of them knew was that at that very moment, the crews of those 20 ships were very much alive. They had been captured using technology that disabled their vessels without harming the occupants, then transferred to hidden facilities where they were learning uncomfortable truths about the regime they had served. Commander Sarah Chen watched through a one-way screen as former Council soldiers sat in circles with representatives of the species their government had oppressed. The expressions on their faces ranged from shock to horror to growing anger as they learned the real history of the galaxy. "Phase 2 is proceeding ahead of schedule," Dr. Webb reported, joining her at the observation window. "The psychological impact of the truth is more effective than we anticipated. 70% of captured personnel have requested to join the resistance." Sarah nodded grimly. "The Council built their empire on lies. When those lies are exposed, the foundation crumbles. How are the other operations going?" Zara's voice crackled through the communication system from her position aboard one of their stealth ships. "Ghostwing to Phoenix Base, the Kepler station. Liberation is complete. We've freed over 10,000 Zilani forced labor workers. They're asking to join the fight." "Tell them they're welcome," Sarah replied. "But remind them this isn't about revenge, it's about justice." The difference was important. Every action the human resistance took was carefully planned to minimize casualties while maximizing impact. They didn't destroy Council facilities, they liberated them. They didn't execute Council personnel, they educated them. They didn't conquer territory, they freed it. It was a strategy that was working better than anyone had dared hope. Captain Jin Watanabe's voice joined the communication network from deep space. "Phoenix Base, this is Strike Leader. We've successfully disabled the Council's main communication hub for Sector 7. The blackout will last approximately 6 hours. Acknowledged, Strike Leader. That's our window. Kalen, are your people ready?" The Ashaki commander's response came from multiple locations simultaneously. His people had become the backbone of the Resistance's intelligence network, using their natural telepathic abilities to coordinate operations across vast distances. "All Ashaki cells are in position," Kalen confirmed. "The truth broadcasts will begin as soon as the Council's jamming systems are offline." Sarah took a deep breath. This was the moment they had been building toward. Phase 3 of the Phoenix Protocol. Not just military action or rescue operations, but something far more dangerous to the Council's continued existence, the truth. "Begin transmission," she ordered. Across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds under Council control, emergency communication systems activated. Screens in public squares, personal communication devices, even the Council's own information networks, began broadcasting the same message. The face that appeared was weathered by time and hardship, but the eyes burned with unquenchable determination. "Citizens of the galaxy," Sarah Chen began, speaking directly to trillions of beings who had never heard a human voice before. "My name is Sarah Chen, commander of the human resistance. 3,000 years ago, my species was declared extinct by the organization you know as the Galactic Council. We were not extinct. We were silenced." The broadcast continued for exactly 1 hour before the Council managed to cut the feeds, but 1 hour was enough. In that time, the galaxy learned about Earth's true fate. They learned about the species that had been erased from history. They learned about the worlds that had been strip-mined to feed the Council's expansion. They learned about the cultures that had been deliberately destroyed to prevent resistance. Most importantly, they learned that resistance was possible, that the Council was not invincible, that there was hope. The reaction was immediate and explosive. On Vorthak Prime, the descendants of the failed rebellion took to the streets, carrying banners bearing human symbols alongside their own. On the Q, mining worlds of the Centauri cluster, slave workers walked away from their posts in massive coordinated strikes. On the core worlds where Council members lived in luxury, protests erupted as citizens demanded answers about the lies they had been told. High Counselor Vextar watched his empire begin to crumble in real time. The command chamber around him was chaos as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Rebellions, strikes, entire systems declaring independence, and at the center of it all, an enemy he had thought extinct. "Mobilize the fleet," he commanded. "All of it. These humans think they can challenge the natural order of the galaxy. We will show them the same mercy we showed their pathetic world." But as the Council's massive war fleet began to assemble, they found themselves facing an enemy unlike any they had fought before. Human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking at supply lines and command vessels before vanishing into the void. Council formations found their communications jammed, their sensors blinded, their weapons systems mysteriously malfunctioning at crucial moments. The final confrontation came at the edge of the Sol system, in the debris field that had once been Earth. High Counselor Vextar led the Council's Grand Fleet personally, determined to finish what his predecessors had started 3 millennia ago. What he found waiting for him defied comprehension. The debris field around Earth had been transformed. Asteroid fortresses hung in space where the planet's moons had once orbited. Massive shipyards, built from the recycled matter of Earth's shattered surface, stretched across millions of kilometers. And everywhere, flying banners that bore the phoenix symbol of humanity reborn. But it wasn't just human ships that waited in the graveyard of Earth. Vessels from hundreds of species filled the space between the asteroids. The Ashaki had come, with their graceful crystal ships. The Vorthak brought their massive battlecruisers. The Centauri arrived in swarms of fighters that moved like flocks of mechanical birds. Every species the Council had oppressed, enslaved, or tried to erase had sent their children to fight in the place where humanity had died. Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Phoenix, the flagship of humanity's return. Around her, humans and aliens worked side by side at stations designed with the best of both their technologies. When she spoke, her words were broadcast to every ship in the combined fleet. "Today we do not fight for conquest," she announced. "We do not fight for revenge. We fight for the right of every species to exist freely among the stars. We fight for truth over lies. We fight for justice over oppression. We fight so that no world will ever suffer Earth's fate again." The battle that followed would be remembered for millennia. But it was not the devastating conflict that Vexitar had expected. When Council ships found their weapons disabled by technology they couldn't understand, when their crews began receiving the same truth broadcasts that had shaken the galaxy, when they realized that surrender meant education rather than execution, the largest fleet in galactic history began to dissolve from within. Vextar himself was captured when his flagship's crew mutinied after learning what their government had truly been doing in their name. He was brought before Sarah Chen, not as a prisoner of war, but as a student who needed to learn the lessons that his people had tried to forget. In the aftermath, as the Galactic Council dissolved and new alliances formed based on cooperation rather than domination, Sarah stood in the observation deck of Phoenix Base, looking out at the stars that humanity had once called home. The Sol system was becoming a symbol of rebirth rather than destruction. Gardens were growing in the asteroid habitats. Children of a dozen species played together in the corridors, where humans had once waited in frozen sleep. Dr. Webb joined her at the viewing window. "The other species are asking what we want now," he said. "They're willing to make us the new dominant power in the galaxy." Sarah smiled and shook her head. "That's exactly what we don't want. Humans had our chance to rule, and look what it led to. Fear, paranoia, the need to destroy anything that threatened our supremacy. So what do we tell them?" Sarah looked out at the stars, seeing not territory to be conquered, but wonders to be explored. "We tell them that the Phoenix doesn't rise to rule the ashes. It rises to ensure that the fire of freedom never dies again." The galaxy was free. The lies had been burned away. And among the stars, human laughter could be heard once more, joined by the voices of 1,000 species who had learned that the universe was large enough for all of them. The Phoenix Protocol was complete. Humanity had returned not as conquerors, but as teachers, not as rulers, but as guardians of the dream, that every species deserved its place among the infinite stars.